Welcome, survivors. This is Eerie Knight of the Pseudo Posse, and today we're going to focus our attention on these two here, the Plague Spitter and the Frost Claw. We'll briefly discuss their mechanics, their stats, and the tips and tricks you'll need to know how to build a horde base to counter their mechanics. I've gone through the trouble of constructing this entire testing scene in order to explore all of these topics and to capture all the nuances of their behavior. I'll showcase the highlights of the experiments I've conducted to arm you all with the information you'll need to be the most successful during Horde Night. Let's start with the basics. You'll first encounter these enemies in their respective biomes, the Plague Spitter roaming freely around the desert, and the Frost Claw in the frozen tundras of the snow biome. You won't see them wandering around in other biomes unless you're on the border of their respective native biome. Both the Spitter and the Frost Claw have a melee and ranged attack, the latter in which operates in different ways. First, the Spitter. His melee attack has a base entity damage of 20 and block damage of 100. Double those stats for the Feral variant, and the Charged Spitter does a whopping 60 damage and respectable 150 block damage, while the Infernal Spitter does slightly less entity damage than the Charged at 45, but a very scary 250 block damage. In general, for all zombies, Charged variants do more damage to the player, while Infernal does more damage to blocks. All damage is subject to scaling based on the game difficulty setting. Alternatively, the Spitter's ranged attack is unique in that it spawns a swarm of insects that track the player down. It will chase you down like other zombie types and has its own hurt box and can be killed. It doesn't matter whether the Spitter is normal, feral, or infernal, the swarm only has one variant and has a base entity damage of 3 and block damage of 1. Upon hitting the player, you also receive a slow debuff lasting a few seconds. One swarm of insects by itself is not threatening, but a literal swarm of insects can pile on the damage, plus distracting you from other zombie threats. Now, the Frost Claw. His melee stats are exactly the same as the Spitter across all tiers, from normal through infernal. However, the true difference lies in the boulder projectile, which operates more closely to Copspit in that it is not a hostile entity that will track the player, rather a pure projectile. The trajectory is parabolic versus the Copspit's fairly straight profile. The damage is rather significant, doing 50 entity and block damage on a direct hit, plus up to 80 entity and 750 explosion damage in a 3.9 and 2.5 meter radius respectively. In other words, his boulder hurts a lot. Best try to avoid that. So all of that is well and good, but why worry about the Horde? Just stay out of their biomes, right? Wrong. Both have the potential to spawn in hordes independent of biome, as long as the game stage is high enough. Normal Plague Spitters will start to appear at game stage 91 with a 5% chance to spawn, while the normal Frost Claw makes his debut at game stage 97 with a 5% chance as well. That chance to spawn will double to 10% by the time you reach game stage 109 for Spitters and 115 for the Frost Claw. Feral variants will join the fray with a 5% chance to spawn at game stage 153 for Spitters and 147 for Frost Claws. There's a much larger gap before you'll start seeing Radiated, Charged, and Infernal variants. The earliest they'll make a splash is at game stage 363 for Spitters and 463 for Frost Claws. At those respective game stages, there's a 5% chance for Radiated and a huge 50% chance for Charged and Infernals. Basically, you'll need to counter these enemies at some point, especially the longer you play. So how do we accomplish that? The rest of the video will be split into two parts: how to counter the Plague Spitter and how to counter the Frost Claw. Let's start with the Plague Spitter. It should come as no surprise that our main goal is to either prevent the insect spawn itself, or at the very least, stop them from entering inside our base to become a distraction or a threat. First, a simple line of sight test. If you all haven't seen our recent block shapes video for the 2.0 update, this might come as a surprise, but all the Cop and Screamer X-ray vision issues in previous alpha versions has finally been fixed. And fortunately, that same courtesy extends to the Spitter. As long as line of sight is broken between you and the Spitters, they will be completely oblivious to your presence and won't spawn the insect swarm, which means you can use any block shape you want. Again, no holes. Naturally, that means any AFK style base in which you hide behind solid walls that completely obstructs the spitter line of sight to you, the player, will completely negate the spitter threat. Job done. But not so fast. We want to prepare for a more active horde, which will require more creative solutions. So let's assume for the rest of the testing that you aren't hiding behind a completely solid wall and they can in fact see you. What are your options at that point? Here's the control of our experiment. Me inside this little test structure with a wide opening, and as expected, the plague spitters will spawn insects and they immediately rush through the opening towards my location and attack. Now I'll introduce a barricade, something simple like the scaffolding ladder, which is a commonly used defensive barrier for static horde fighting positions. One extra thing to keep in mind is the fact that zombies can now easily move through 1 meter holes, and the smaller size zombies can move through sub 1 meter holes. The spitter is definitely among that group, so be very careful as to what shapes you use as a barricade. The scaffolding ladder, for example, is no longer sufficient on its own. Consider adding another block to cover the scaffold while still retaining the utility of the shape. The plate counter hole is a potential candidate to serve this purpose. At a distance, the spitters spawn their insects and they fly towards my structure. Most attack the roof blocks, not unlike vulture behavior, but some attack the side walls randomly. However, once the plague spitters close the distance, they will continue to spawn insects repeatedly, and most of them are easily able to make it inside, becoming a distraction and in greater numbers, a threat. So, no bueno. The obvious question from that little test becomes, is there a block shape that isn't a solid wall like the cube that can prevent the ingress of insects, still block hop spit, and still allow you to melee, shoot through, and throw consumables? The answer to that question is seemingly no. I tried a variety of poles, catwalks, trim, windows, cubes, and round shapes, too many shapes to keep track of, and not only that, I tried them in a bunch of combinations with each other, like this example here with the cube half-thin window arch and scaffolding ladder, all to no avail. While I could meet the other requirements, nothing could stop the swarm from entering. However, like the cops, the plague spitters seem to operate on the principle that they will only engage their ranged attack if they can see the player head. So if you block your ugly mug while still retaining a hole by using the window top half round shape, for example, the spitters won't spawn the insects at all. They'll still see you and rush to melee attack you, but as long as you keep your face hidden, they won't spawn in the insects. However, the severe downside is that it is much harder to melee or shoot with this setup, and headshots become virtually impossible. Thus, in my humble opinion, it isn't worth sacrificing your ease of killing all other zombies just to avoid spawning the swarm of insects. As a last act of desperation, I even tried the dynamic grate and other such blocks, which have some very small openings, and those bloody insects could still get through. After all of that testing, can I guarantee that there isn't some elusive magical shape that can prevent their entry while still being a usable block shape for fighting? Without testing all blocks and all block combinations, I can never be 100% sure, but having tested all the obvious and some less obvious shapes in several combinations with each other, I think I can guarantee with 99% certainty that even if a block or combination of blocks exists that can stop the insect swarm while allowing you to fight through it, you'll end up sacrificing either ease of melee hits, shooting line of sight, and/or cops being able to hit you. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but I don't think that is likely given the current set of block shapes available as of 2.0. That all sounded rather depressing, but there is still hope, my friends. Recall earlier how I mentioned that when the spitters spawn the insects at range, they tend to go for the roof. That is the strategy. Prevent them from getting close, or at the very least, if they do get close, have a way to remove them if you can't kill them fast enough. And spikes to deal with the roof insects. You should have spikes anyway on your roofs to handle the vultures, so that can dual purpose the swarm as well. We can accomplish keeping the plague spitter at range through the use of a zombie dropper. I showcased quite a few options in our latest 2.0 block shapes video, so go check that out for some good zombie pathing shapes. But Simply choose one you like and keep the spitters away from you. Here I chose to go with the plate, quarter, triangle and added some bars to improve the effectiveness. Try as they might, they cannot get close enough and the bulk of their insects end up flying into the spikes on my roof. Remove some or all of the bars to allow more spitters across if you want some more melee action rather than shooting. And once they do reach your position, if you don't outright kill them, they'll either run off themselves or get knocked off by you. Either way, they won't be around long enough to generate enough nuisance. Again, I suggest you check out the Block Shapes video for more options in creating a viable zombie dropper pathing loop which should suit your needs here. Except if the spitters have line of sight on you after they drop or when they are coming up the stairs, the insects won't all route to the roof. Instead, a great many will still come inside through your defenses. So one option would be to simply wall off their line of sight from down below, or another option would be to encase the zombie dropper entirely. Take this design for example. Ramp 8 meter 04 on the sides in red, positioned such that both rows create a wide V-shaped profile. On top in yellow is a basic cube half block, and the zombie dropper itself below in purple, the pull 4-way. We are going to quickly increase the effectiveness of this design by eliminating all blocks immediately in front of our defensive barricade and replace it with the pillar 0.025 meter half side centered. Position it with the gap towards your side. This will more easily funnel zombies off the sides and below than having the pull 4-way all the way against the barricade. Just a little tip. Then on top of the pillar shape, place more pull 4-ways which will serve as our barricade as an alternative shape to the scaffolding ladder. Like the scaffolding ladder, we'll need to block it off some to prevent zombies squeezing through the opening. And for that, I'll use the ramp 6 meter 04 shape above and below. After spawning in some spitters, we can see that they no longer stop to spawn insects either upon climbing the stairs or dropping. And even if they did, the insects would not have a clear path to us. Also, by narrowing the barricade to a single block width opening versus the 3 we had in the previous design, any swarm that does come through can easily be taken out with a single melee strike, as they only have one place to enter, a choke point essentially. If you have an enclosed roof over your path, they will be a bit more likely to come through your barricade, though some will either sit back and eventually despawn, or find their way up to the roof assuming the enclosed pathing roof is passable like the railing diagonals used here. But simply removing the blocks right above the end of the path will cause the bulk of the swarm to fly up onto your roof and hit the spikes as intended. So to summarize the overall strategy, use a zombie dropper to keep most spitters at range. Block their line of sight so they'll only spawn insects at the level of the zombie dropper path. Spitter spawning insects at ground level will be a nuisance. If your zombie dropper allows zombies to get close to your barricade for melee action, have a way to quickly expel them so they don't have a chance to spawn insects through your barricade. And finally, have spikes on your roof to deal with most insects. Lining your zombie dropper roof with spikes also is an excellent way of taking out some of the insects at the source. It also doesn't hurt to have railings or bars as your roof just under the spikes, as insects that do enter your base but aren't outright killed have a chance to fly up and hit the spikes from down below. The lower the roof, the better the chance of that happening. A later game stage option, if zombie droppers aren't your style, is the use of electric fence posts. Naturally, high damage dealing traps like darts and turrets can do the trick, but simple fence posts can also greatly help. They won't take out the swarms themselves, but they can help to stun lock the plague spitters, dramatically reducing the opportunity they have to spawn in the insects. It won't be an early game solution, but you won't be seeing the plague spitters early game anyway, so it should be pretty easy to have access to fence posts at a minimum by the time they start spawning in hordes at game stage 91. At this point, I think we've more or less settled all the nuances of the plague spitter. Now let's turn our attention toward our lumbering yeti friend. This beast looks ferocious, but by comparison, he's a relative kitten. Like the spitter, he also obeys the new rules on line of sight with blocks, meaning he won't notice you unless you make your presence known. The same baseline test with a wide open structure produces similar results. He does his ranged attack and promptly closes the distance for a more personal touch. However, unlike the Plague Spitter, once we erect a barricade composed of scaffolds again, the boulder, when thrown at a distance, strikes the scaffolds and stops. It does a lot of damage, but it stops the projectile. But when he closes the distance, he can continue to throw through your barricade and hit you, and all the blocks within. Anything vulnerable, like lights, will be instantly destroyed from all the AoE damage. Thus, we are confronted with the same exact question as we had with the Spitter. Is there some magic block that can prevent his projectile from slipping through? For comparison's sake, I chose to demonstrate the same combination to keep it 1-to-1 with the Spitter tests, and that would be the scaffolds combined with the cube half-thin window arch. They easily stopped the boulder at a distance like the solo scaffolding ladders, but when at the proverbial gates, the Frostclaws were still able to penetrate my defenses. Interestingly, I did discover how powerful weapons with knockback are against the Frostclaw. Since his boulder can only slip through the barricade when he is right against it, simply forcing him back negates this effect. If he throws his projectile a few meters away, it won't pass through, and as long as you keep forcing him back or stunning him, you can perpetually keep him at bay. The stun baton with the intelligent mastery maxed truly shines here, as an always charged baton is extremely effective. Overly effective, in fact. The sledgehammer is also an excellent option as well, with the knockback and stun effect. You could stop right here and be set. No need for a zombie dropper, no need for any special block, it works that well. But we're not going to take the easy way out and stop here. No, sir. Let's march on it and continue testing. What if we added another layer of scaffolds? Since their arms stretch through the barricade, a second line of defense might be enough to stop the boulder, and it appears that works quite well. The only downside is shorter weapons are at a massive disadvantage, with the machete just barely reaching. This can work in a pinch, or if you plan on using more ranged weaponry, but definitely limits the ability to melee adequately for my tastes. Now, let's try out one of my favorite blocks, the pull 4-way. Given the block has a larger opening than the scaffolds, I don't have high hopes. But screw it, we're going to science everything. I doubled up the poles in the middle to try and create some extra separation, but they seem to be a bit shy in using their projectile, so I created a hole in the back of my little test structure so I could stand further back to hopefully entice them to throw their boulder. And wow, am I seeing things right? It appears the pole is positioned just right to block the boulder when they throw it at point blank range. Science is all about repeatability, so let's see if this trend continues. And impressive, that seems to actually work. I even removed the second row of double pull 4-ways and it still worked. Amazing. Looks like we've got our magic block. Hell yeah. Before we head back to the other base, I want to test out one more thing. If they know where I am at, but cannot see me, will they still do the boulder? To test that out, I hid in the corner and grabbed their attention, and nope, they do not engage the boulder. This bodes well for base construction, for as long as you break their line of sight until you are ready to fight them, they won't boulder you. So always make sure your base is well protected, and it just so happens this base was already set up for success, as the corridor around the zombie dropper already blocks most of their line of sight. The zombie dropper is definitely not necessary for this guy, but as you really need it for the Spitter, you really need to accommodate both, as the Horde can potentially spawn either one or both of them. And naturally, the zombie dropper approach works incredibly well against him too, as if he isn't there long enough to grab his boulder at point blank range, he can't throw it. So even the pull 4-way becomes less of a necessity in that use case, and when used in combination with a weapon that does knockback, it isn't even a fair fight. Poor Yeti buddy, I almost feel sorry for him. But then you must keep in mind he does a ton of block damage, so definitely don't underestimate him and keep up with those repairs. This guy already has so much going against him. Is it even worth to check out the electric fence post as a late game option? Absolutely, for comparison's sake. And I have to say, it's just too good against him. Not only does it negate his boulder throw at close range, it can even stun lock him and interrupt his throw at range. Frozen in existential terror. Gosh, this poor cupcake. Someone be his friend. Please give your love and support for the Frostclaw in the comments. He really lacks self-esteem. Damn, I feel terrible. So going into this, did I know how all the results would pan out? Absolutely not. In fact, I would have thought at the very least, the threat presented by each would be roughly equal, with the potential edge going towards the Frostclaw. I was dead wrong. Oh shit. Oh my god. Not good. Not good.
Uh-oh.
Not good
What's
at
wrong?
all.
I'm almost here.
Landslide victory for the Plague Spitter.
Oh, there you
Not
are.
even
Oh,
close in
God.
my opinion.
You have bees and a vulture?
Yeah.
Come back by me, turn if you can.
Plague Spitter is way more annoying, and you can never truly stop 100% of the swarm from reaching you unless you opt for a cheese AFK base or something like that. Anyways, this video has gone on long enough. I hope you all liked all of the testing, experimentation, and building we do on this channel. In the course of testing out this video, I came up with some more things that I want to test out in the future, and my first base build video will be coming out after that, so stay tuned. If any of you have any suggestions for things you would like to see, share it in the comments and I'll take a look. Give the video a like if you found the journey enjoyable or just as a general way to support our channel, as the algorithm loves them likes. Make sure to subscribe and tap the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on the next one. Lastly, Taco Bear and I would like to extend our deepest thanks to our wonderful Patreon community. All of you help make this possible. On that note, this is Eerie Knight signing off. See you all in the next
bees
one.
again. No. Oh my no.
Oh, gee.
Why?